Any other questions about the waiver? All right, Jennifer, it's all you. All right, is everybody feeling settled? Everybody get a good break? Now, I was just saying before I came up here that that Mike set a pretty high bar this morning. So I don't know, I have to bring my funny factor up a little bit. I wanted to take some time to talk to you guys about what your learning contract is, why it's important, how you guys can make it useful and helpful, and basically give you guys some basic guidelines moving forward, because this is something you guys are supposed to start looking at during block week. If you guys look at your MSW calendar, you can see that your learning contracts are due, correct me if I'm wrong, but September 23rd through September 27th. That is the week that your learning contract is due. You guys flip to the back of your handbook where the forms are. We actually have a specific template that you will need to use. Somebody finds the page number, shout it out. 92. Okay. It's the Foundation Field Placement Learning Contract. It starts on page 90. This is the template that you should use. So if you guys want to draft it up in a Word document just to get your ideas hashed out, that's fine, but it needs to be formally submitted in this template, okay? If you guys look at the first page, you can see that there's a signature box. It needs to be signed by your MSW field instructor. Page 91. Okay? So with signatures, that brings us back to our conversation about our good friend the scanner. Because you guys will need to scan your signed learning contract and upload it onto Blackboard. If you guys remember, Mike's demonstration from yesterday wasn't so successful with uploading it, so hopefully you guys will have a better go at it than we did. But you will go into that section, and you saw where it said you could upload your timesheet or your learning contract. That's where you're going to upload your learning contract. We get a ton of calls about this. We don't require you guys to have the field liaison sign it before you upload it, okay? They're going to sign it when they come out and do their agency visit with you guys. Your field liaison should have a copy of your learning contract, okay? So not only are you guys uploading it onto Blackboard for us, you also need to email a version of it to your field liaison. Any questions about when it's due and who it goes to?
So is there a blank one on Blackboard that we found though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. When you guys get into Blackboard under content, was that the tab?
Yes, that was under course documents, and I put some documents on there for our training, but I think I gotta upload them all. Y'all get an email from me Monday morning while your first day in field, and it'll give you some directions about where all these things are.
But it will be available to you guys on Blackboard. There's a couple things I want to start off with saying about learning contracts, because a while ago, and I'm not going to say how long, I was sitting where you were, and I heard this whole conversation about learning contracts, and I thought to myself, just another thing I need to do. And I got to my field placement, and they had copies of the learning contracts from the year before, from the other students. I said, oh wow, great. Just changed the date and the name. And then I sat down with my field instructor, and she said, why would you want to do that? And it really forced me to have a dialogue with her about what it actually is. And this is the way I kind of view it. Your learning contract is like your roadmap. It's like your framework of what you're going to do for the entire year. Okay? When you're doing your learning contract, it's for the whole year. You may differentiate between what you're going to do in the fall semester and the spring. For example, if you're doing a short-term group, or a task group, or a community event, or a gala, or a fundraiser. We're going to talk about that later. But, bless you, but it's for the whole year, guys. So, and it's really, you can think of it kind of like a contract, because it's your way of saying, these are the things I want to do, and I'm expecting to do. And it's your field instructor saying, these are things I'm going to provide to you. Okay? So it's really a contract between the two of you. And the greatest thing about the learning contract is that it's a workable document. It's not an assignment in a paper that you just have to complete, pass in, and never look at again. It's modifiable. So let's say all of a sudden your agency gets a huge grant, and they decide they're going to start offering some new services, or they're going to hire some new staff, and that would give you an opportunity to do a different group. Well, guess what? Get your learning contract out, add some stuff to it. If all of a sudden your agency loses funding, loses staff, loses services, all of a sudden something you may have originally laid out to do may not be an option for you anymore. You just go into your learning contract, strike it out, okay? It's something that you always need to have with you at supervision. We're going to talk about supervision later. But when you go to your supervision sessions with your field instructor, you really need to use it as a check-in. How am I doing on my learning contract? How am I progressing through the tasks and activities that we've designated as my learning goals for the year? Okay? And Dr. Reitmeyer does, she always tells a story about when she supervised students at Protection and Advocacy, and I love this story, is that one of the first things she would do with her students before she even had them start on the learning contract was to do a self-inventory and to be able to self-identify what they thought were their strengths and their weaknesses. And that was a starting point for developing tasks for the learning contract. So everybody in here has different strengths and different weaknesses. So if you copied somebody's learning contract from last year, you might have a goal on there that you don't really need. So, for example, how many of you would be comfortable standing up here with a microphone in front of 250 people? Okay, maybe like 8% of you. Believe me, this was not a skill that came easy to me. So, for example, let's say you're at Protection and Advocacy, and they do a fundraising event, and they want you to do the opening remarks to a group of well-established community members. The NASW president might be there, right? The governor, Nikki Haley, might come, and they say, this is what we want you to do. Oh my God, I need to put some learning tasks on there about practicing public speaking, okay? How many of you guys are comfortable leading a group of people you've never met in your life? Okay. How many of you, that would absolutely terrify you? Having to walk into a group of strangers you've never met and lead a group? Raise your hand. Be honest. It's okay, it's scary, right? So let's say you get into your field placement and they're like, well, spring semester you're going to be doing group. Well, what do you want to do in the fall semester? Practice, right? Okay. So this is one thing I really would encourage you guys to do, is sit down and figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are and use that when you're starting to build your field placement learning contract. And it's really important, guys, to understand that no two learning contracts should be the same, okay? How many of you guys know that there's going to be another MSW student with you at your field site? That's a good percentage of you. Should you and that other student have the same exact learning contract? No. Does anybody want to tell me why? Shout it out. Why do you want a different learning contract?
You're different. I'm a different person.
Because you're a different person?
Different tasks.
Different tasks?
Maybe you have different goals.
Maybe different goals. Great. So for example, let's say you're placed at I just had a dialogue with a student who's placed at a mental health center in the upstate. That mental health center has different units, specialized units. They have a PHP, partial hospitalization program. They've got a program that works just with dual diagnosis. They may have an intake unit. They may have a long-term unit. They may have crisis intervention and discharge, right? So let's say your specific social worker works on one unit. But wouldn't it be awesome to be able to shadow one of the other units for a couple weeks or a couple days while you're in field? Now, the two of you who are placed at the same agency, one of you might have a really big interest in dual diagnosis, one of you could care less. So that's what I mean. This is what I'm really trying to stress to you guys. Needs to be individualized. It's kind of like your own little IEP, your individualized education plan. I can use that now. Sure, I just did. And I think when you guys get started on it, you can't start your learning contract without having your evaluation out. You guys want to flip to the back of your packet and get the foundation evaluation out. Now, Dr. Reitmeyer is going to talk about this later in generalities.
You're seeing how all sides we have.
Okay? I'm actually looking at mine now, so I can see what we're looking at.
The evaluation of the student.
Yes, the foundation field evaluation.
And this one was completed by the MSWOrientationAug2013.
It's right
On
out.
page 93. That sound about right?
It's all right. Okay, thank you.
Now there are, what, over 60 indicators on here, correct?
Yes, a lot.
74. So y'all need to come up with at least 80 learning goals. What? Silence in the room. Just kidding. Just kidding. No, but your face was priceless, by the way. Absolutely priceless. But as you can see, guys, if you look at your evaluation, there's headers. And those headers are the competencies that Dr. Reitmeyer talked about this morning. So if you flip to the second page of the evaluation, it's field competency number 1. Student functions as a social worker within the placement setting. Now, all of those indicators underneath that competency, you will be evaluated on. Now, does that mean you need to come up with a learning goal for every single one? No. No. But let's look at a couple. Critically analyzes social problems. I'm looking at 27. Critically analyzes social problems that have an impact on the placement settings, targeted service community. Okay? That may not be a long-term goal. That may be even just the dialogue you have with your field instructor. So for example, I've been the field liaison for students placed at the Substance Abuse Prevention Education Office here on campus. How many of you guys are familiar with USC football and tailgating? Right? Okay. So when I sat down with my students and they said to me, Jen, I have no idea what that means. What does that mean? I have no idea. Critically analyze, I don't know. I got lost after analyze. I say, okay, USC is a big football school, right? We got ESPN game day on campus, right? We're always on ESPN. They shut down downtown Columbia. You can't even get on Assembly Street on game day. If you live on Assembly Street, you know that now. So and I said to the students, I said, so what are things in the community that impact the students' drinking behaviors? And then we opened up a really great dialogue about the drinking culture and how there's a formal policy and there's kind of an informal policy and how that kind of affects what they do with the students, right? Because the students hear one thing, don't drink. You drink, you end up at the Office of Student Conduct, pay fees, right? But then they go to the games and guess what? Everybody's drinking, right? That's tailgating, let's have fun, right? We had a great dialogue about that, okay? So I pulled that out, guys, as an example. Because some things are going to be long-term things you're going to do all year. And some are things that you just really need to have a dialogue about. Dr. Reitmeyer always loves to give this example because this is one of the indicators we always get not applicable. And you might be able to find out which one it is, what number it is student handles conflict effectively. Now, a lot of you in here and a lot of your field instructors will hit not applicable. because they go, oh, I'm getting a fight. Okay? How do you guys define conflict? How do you, it's 52. How would you operationally define conflict? Anybody, throw it out there. Differences of opinion can be a conflict, right?
Be simple like scheduling.
Okay, could be a schedule conflict. Anybody else, throw it out.
Personality clash.
A personality clash, right? How many of you guys have ever been part of a multidisciplinary team? Okay? How many of you guys who have your hands up, keep them up. How many of you guys have had a difference of opinion about what needs to happen with a client? Oh, that's a lot of hands still up, isn't it? Is that a conflict? Yeah, that's a conflict, guys. It's a difference of opinion in terms of the appropriate intervention for that client. So when you guys are going through these evaluations and you're looking at all these indicators, I want you to really think about what it means. Dr. Reitmeyer's competency worksheet that she showed you guys earlier is a wonderful resource because it gives you dialogue starters for figuring out what these things mean. So, do we need you guys to have 80 plus indicators? No. Some of these things are just dialogues you're going to have during supervision, or things that are what we call teachable moments, right? That just happen on the fly. All of a sudden you're like, wow, we're in a teachable moment. It's happening. Didn't put it on my learning contract, but here it is, right?
I was going to throw in just another example too. Like all of those under number 1 in the beginning, if you're working on a grant proposal and you do something for your agency, you're pretty much going to knock out a lot of these if you're having to put a proposal together and you have to substantiate why there's a need to do what you're wanting to do. You're going to cross out a lot of these by work through your assignments that you're doing in the field practical.
Let's dig a little bit more into this evaluation, because really, guys, this is your roadmap to starting your learning contract. Anybody want to help me find the indicators about supervision?
You're under field competency 2 and start with 41.
Thank you. All right, we're looking at field competency 2, and we're looking at 41, 42, 43, 44. Uses supervision and consultation appropriately by preparing for conferences. Uses supervision and consultation appropriately by accepting and utilizing criticism. So on and so forth. So all 4 of those have to do with what? Supervision, right? So could you do one goal on your learning contract that says, I will prepare an agenda of topics I want to talk about for supervision. I will schedule supervision sessions, and I will follow up and utilize feedback I receive from my supervision sessions. Done. One goal, 5 indicators. So you guys kind of getting the hang of what we're talking about? Okay.
It'll make more sense when you do the workshop.
Yeah. But it's really important to you guys. I know a lot of you guys in here, and you know, I'll be very honest and authentic and genuine with you right now. When I came into this program, I had my undergraduate degree in psychology. I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, right? Moved down to South Carolina, and at the time, this was the only social work program in the state. This was it. And so I talked to some people I won't name it. It's a university here that likes orange. No. And I know. I just talked to them once about their master's in psychology program. And then I said to myself, what am I going to do with that degree, right? Then I started talking to people who I knew in the field. They said, Jennifer, this degree, this master's in social work degree is the most versatile degree you can obtain. And that's how I ended up here. But I was a little apprehensive in the beginning, right? Because when I got here, I was like, I'm going to do therapy. I'm going to be a therapist and open up my own private practice, right? That was my goal. So I got in here and I was listening to all this policy. What? Research. What? My undergraduate degree was in psychology, so what did I focus on in my undergraduate? Focus on the client, just the client. The internal processes going on with them, right? Took cognitive psych, took personality theory, all these fun Freud classes, behavior modification, and the rat, and the dog, and Pavlov, right? And I got here and I was like, what? I have to do a policy analysis? Why? Why? I want to be a therapist. Why are they making me do these things? And I sat down with my field instructor one day when we were doing our learning contract. I'm tying this all in. And she said to me, Jennifer, tell me about what you did as a case manager when you worked with adults with developmental disabilities. And I gave her some funny stories, and I told her my job description. And she did a wonderful thing. She said to me, you told me a great story, Jennifer, about how your day-to-day was direct interventions and direct work with the clients. But then all of a sudden your organization decided they wanted to expand. They wanted to open another supported apartment program and another group home. And your community was up in arms. Why? Not in my backyard, right? Great, build a homeless shelter. That's wonderful. Don't do it in downtown Columbia in your businesses, right? Oh, you want to open up a halfway house, right? Help people transition out of the federal correctional system. That's awesome. Don't do it in Shandon, right? So all of a sudden, I was just this little old me, working with my clients, doing my day-to-day. Then all of a sudden I realized, I need to do something about this. I need to do something about this. So me and my other colleagues got together, and we started going door to door, introducing ourselves, community engagement. We went to town hall, we went to city hall, we talked to selectmen. We used research, data, to show people how effective our program was, why we needed this, why this was a needed thing in their community, how this would be beneficial to the community. And guess what? We got our programs. And my field instructor said to me, Jennifer, you've been a social worker. You've been doing social work. You just didn't realize it. Because social work is about much more than just therapy. It's about policy, understanding your community, understanding our clients in the context of their environment, and understanding how that environment shapes them. And so I tell you guys this because a lot of you sitting in here may not realize the social work skills that you're using or have already used. And when you start looking at your learning contract and you get to the indicators that say, analyzes policy, utilizes research, you guys are like, oh God, how am I going to come up with something for that? I don't do that. I'm challenging each and every one of you in this room to look at what you have done and what you have the capacity to do and realize that you're doing much more on multiple system levels, all the way from just that one client to the agency as a whole, to the community as a whole, to the state, all the way up to the federal level. I really want you guys to kind of open your minds a little bit when you're looking at your learning contracts and realize that some of this is not just silly academic language that we throw in here, right? There's a reason that we put each one of these indicators in here. And so, I'm going to kind of try and wrap it up a little bit because we're going to get into the workshop, but we're going to talk a little bit about what a good learning goal is and what a bad learning goal is, or an inadequate or strength-based. For example, let's say you're going to do group, right? And you write your goal, we'll do group. Is that a good learning goal? No. What's wrong with that learning goal? It's not specific. What else? It's not measurable. What else? Anybody else? Right, exactly. So when you're, in your handout, or I'm hoping it's in your handout, I usually talk about the Spiro approach to goal development. Your goals need to be specific. That's the S in Spiro. P, they need to be performance-oriented. I, they need to spell out what your involvement is in that task. R, they need to be realistic in the time frame and the resources available to you, and they need to be observable, okay? So that's the approach I want everybody to utilize when you're working on your learning goals, the spiral approach. So let's try that goal again. Will do group, not specific, right? Specific would be what? What type of group, right? I'm going to be doing the psychoeducational parenting class. That's more specific. Performance-oriented and involvement. Well, what's your role in the group? Are you observing the group? Are you co-facilitating the group? Are you leading the group? Okay? Spell out your involvement in the goal. Okay? Make it realistic. How many of you guys in here are self-identified overachievers? Raise your hands proud. Come on. How many of you guys tend to bite off more than you can chew? Okay. So do you want to put a goal in there that you're going to be doing 10 groups a week? And you're only there 16 hours a week? No. Okay? So it needs to be realistic, guys, in terms of the time frame that you're going to be there. And it needs to be something that's observable, because guess what? When your field instructor gets to the end of the semester and they have to fill out that 60-page evaluation on you, they're going to dig out your learning contract. So if you wrote a goal that said, will do group, how would they evaluate you on that? I did it once. Right? If you make it really observable, guess what? You're going to get a much better evaluation. If you say, I'm going to co-facilitate the bi-weekly psychoeducational parenting class during the fall semester, when it comes time to the end of the semester, you're going to get a fair evaluation, right? A lot of times when we get calls from students, oh my God, I got this evaluation and it said needs improvement.
I'm going to talk about the scores later.
And Dr. Reitmeyer is going to talk about the scores later. It's because there wasn't a clear learning contract and a clear dialogue between the student and the field instructor. So how many of you guys feel that you can be fairly evaluated if you didn't have good evaluation indicators, right? So when you guys are going through your learning contract, every single goal needs to have an action verb in it. Who's heard about, when you guys do your resumes, right? And you have little bullet points under each job heading. How many of you have heard that each bullet point should have an action, performance-oriented verb in it? If not, go home and change your resume. Or how many of you read my pre-filled PowerPoint? It was great, by the way. It was. Just needed some graphics and some music. But that, when you guys are doing your learning contracts, it should have an action verb, performance-oriented, facilitated, conducted, participated, analyzed, developed. Shout some out, guys. Action verbs. Help me out. Maintain. Anything else? Come on.
Initiated.
Initiated, organized, implemented. Okay? Every single goal on your learning contract should start with an action verb. And when you do your learning contract, guys, you're not doing it in isolation. Now, some of you, depending on your field instructor's supervisory style, they may say to you, draft it up, give it to me, I'll look it over, and then we'll have a dialogue about it in supervision, right? Kind of the laissez-faire supervisory style. Some of you may have more type A personality field instructors. We're going to do it together, right? We're going to sit down line by line, do it together. Now, some of you may have a field instructor who says, I'm going to draft up the framework, and then I want you to personalize it and individualize it. I'm going to put down the main tasks that we do here, and then I want you to draft it. So I get a ton of calls during block week. Panic students. They're making me do my learning contract. Well, yes. We talked about that at orientation. Were you there? Were you in the bathroom? So I don't want anyone to panic. Everybody's going to have a different approach and a different style to doing their learning contract. But the most important thing, guys, is that you sit down and make sure that you have a clear dialogue with your field instructor so they understand what you mean by your goal. Don't just hand it to them in a rush at 4 o'clock when you're trying to get to your 5 o'clock class and say, can you sign this? Dr. Reitmeyer said I have to upload it on Blackboard. And I don't want to get an email from Dr. Reitmeyer saying I didn't upload it on Blackboard. Okay? Plan on time, guys, to sit down and have a dialogue about it. Because how you interpret a goal may be very different than how somebody else interprets a goal.
I would
add to that, your field instructors will be very invested in your learning contract too, because as Jennifer described earlier, it's your roadmap. So they're going to want to make sure, they want to make sure you learn, but they want it to be value added for the organization as well. So it is a mutually agreed upon contract of what work will happen during the year, what learning will happen, how skills, values, and knowledge, and of course it's open to change, but it's your opportunity to hold it to supervision. It's your opportunity to make sure if you really want to go do some shadowing on another unit that you get an opportunity to do it by including it in your learning contract. I mean, anybody in here ever bought a house? A couple people. I mean, anytime that you've got to negotiate a price somewhere, it's kind of the same thing. You know, you want to, this is about you making sure your learning is safeguarded.
And, you know, I think it's really important too that you guys really understand from the get-go that this is, and we've kind of talked about this already, this is your generalist foundation field placement, okay? Nobody should have a learning contract that says have a caseload of 10, okay? Nobody in here should walk in on block week and get a client on their own, okay? That is not what this field placement is. We tend not to give out samples or examples because then people copy them. I don't understand why they don't know that we know they copied it, but it happens every year. So I was just going to give you some general examples of tasks. Don't write them down, I'm watching. Some general tasks that foundation students did last year. We pulled these from learning contracts from last year. Effectively used supervision. Reviewed case records. Shadowed agency staff. Completed a literature review. Visited relating community agencies. Attended committee or board meetings. Constructed a genogram or an ecomap. Assisted in the development of a treatment plan. Developed and completed a research project. Completed referrals or community resources. Attended staff meetings. Okay? This is generalist foundation level learning tasks. Okay? So if you guys start developing learning contracts, oh, I'm going to facilitate a group by myself, I'm going to caseload of 10, I'm going to be using all these theories, that's not what this is. So I know when you guys get into class together, you guys like to compare notes. What are you doing? What are you doing at field? Well, I don't do that. But you do that? I didn't know that. There's nothing wrong with my field placement. Then we get calls. Well, Susie from my 732 class said that she's got a client. So I need a new placement. Because I don't have a client.
We know we do. We get a lot of calls like that.
So I don't want you guys to start using fear tactics in class. Because I want you to know that sometimes what people present to you may not be the most authentic version, sometimes. So at the end of the day, everyone in this room will be doing some of the things I just mentioned, okay? So I know some of you may be in different settings than other people, and you guys may compare settings, but at the end of the day, that is what your generalist foundation field placement should look like.
Yeah, you all have a learning contract with the same competencies. So,
Oh, I see hands, okay?
Couple questions. One, simple is good. So my goal is to wash my car. My goal is to, wash my car using a wax on, wax off method.
I do like the specific. You want to balance between being too general and not specific. Jennifer gave you a list that where we probably cut out specificity because it would identify certain things. So, I mean, if you're doing a group, you want to say what group you're doing it in, as she stated earlier. So some of the things you talked about weren't about how to write it, so much as the content you should be doing.
Do you have another question?
Yes. And then how do we integrate our assignments from class into the
That's a great question. How do I integrate the assignments Dr. Reitmeyer talked about into my class? Number one thing you should do, guys, and I think we've already mentioned this, is take copies of your syllabi and give them to your field instructors. And like Mike said, don't just hand it to them. Have you seen your syllabus? It's like 18 pages. They don't have time to read 18 pages. You need to sit down with them and say, for my social work with individuals and families class, I need to do a 10 to 12 page psychosocial assessment, which means I'm going to need to identify a client that would be appropriate for me to do that with. Guess what? Add that in as a learning goal. Okay?
I was gonna say, here's what I require, because I was a field instructor for 12 years, is I asked my students, and I would, if it would behoove you to do this,
And take it upon your own initiative, because I did it as a student. I requested that my students give me a copy and highlight the assignments that they wanted to integrate in the field. And then we had a discussion about it. Because the learning contract is not due until mid-September, that gives you plenty of time to get oriented to the organization. You know, you're going to be there block week. You don't have to have it completely written. And you've got a whole month to kind of figure and pound some things out. So I would spend time after you have those classes going through it, thinking about what you can do for field, and highlight it and say, I've highlighted and note tab for you where I'd like to do some things that might cross over, and I was hoping that we could have a dialogue about it in our supervision meeting. That kills a lot, that takes care of a lot of things. Establishes when you're going to meet, have supervision, and it helps as part of the beginning negotiation of what's included in your learning contract.
Hold on, was there another hand over here? Yes. I feel like a game show. It's really awesome. All I need is the whammy buzzer.
So I was looking at this learning contract, and I may have missed something because so we're writing up the learning contract with these 5 field competencies, and then this evaluation form for the student. This doesn't change.
The evaluation form with all the indicators is completed by your field instructor.
Okay, so we don't do anything with that.
You need to utilize this in the development of the learning
Okay,
contract.
so we'll
So